This is IA Forward, your playbook for success as an independent insurance agent. Here to help you knock it out of the ballpark are your hosts, Shane Tatum and Tonya Lead.
Welcome to IA Forward. I'm just kidding. Go ahead, Tonya.
There you go. See, you no longer need me. That's my job right there. I had one job and you did it better.
You know, sometimes you just get spontaneous and do things, right? And you just come out of your shell a little bit.
Well, I think we're going to come out of our shell for our show a little bit today. In our last episode, you brought up the Fonz, Arthur Fonzarelli. And I was a huge Happy Days fan growing up. A fun fact, the only way as an infant that my parents could get me to go to sleep, because I did not like to sleep, which has not changed to this day, is they would put the Fonz's favorite album on the record player beside the crib, and that's what would play to put me, you know, everybody else listened to lullabies, and I listened to the Happy Days theme song and Bill Haley and his Comets, right? And so all of that being said, I loved the Fonz reference that you gave in our last episode. And I thought, you know, there are so many things that the Fonz can teach us about being successful.
Yeah, he was the coolest guy on earth when I was a kid. And I loved Happy Days as well, and spent a lot of hours eating a bowl of cereal, watching reruns of Happy Days. I guess that was my equivalent to phones and social media and iPads and all that stuff. Is we had sitcom reruns, and we had Happy Days, and we had Laverne and Shirley, and we had all these other things, and there just wasn't a show or a character, especially for a young boy, right? I mean, who didn't want to grow up to be the Fonz?
Or date the Fonz, right? I mean, like, from a girl's perspective, who didn't want to grow up to date the Fonz?
Yeah, I didn't want to date the Fonz, but I did want to be the Fonz, and maybe I wanted to date the girls that wanted to date the Fonz. There was just everything about him that was super cool. And the leather jacket, I mean, I don't know. I don't know how many leather jackets I probably went through as a kid trying to emulate the Fonz.
Okay, there've got to be pictures somewhere of this visual, and I'm going to need those.
We took no pictures. There are no pictures.
I'll see what I can do on that. But, you know, your family doesn't do a lot of pictures, so there may not be. But when you look at Happy Days as a television show, and the actors and Hollywood celebrities that were part of this show, it's amazing. I mean, Ron Howard, Henry Winkler, Tom Bosley, Anson Adams, Scott Baio, Robin Williams was on Happy Days. I mean, it's absolutely incredible to go in. And if you didn't grow up watching Happy Days, or like us, the reruns of Happy Days, there's a ton of episodes are available on YouTube. Yes, we are dating ourselves on this one, but I think there's something to be said for a look back, a little retro show. And for those of you that did grow up watching Happy Days, then this is going to be a little bit of a time hop for you.
There were several shows, Happy Days leading the way. Laverne and Shirley, you mentioned Robin Williams, and just spin-off shows. Joni Loves Chachi or something like that.
Right. Mork and Mindy.
Mork and Mindy was a spin-off. There was just so many other shows that were created from Happy Days. If you really get down to the center of that, not unlike the Seinfeld, Friends, Cheers of the 80s and 90s into the 90s. And we just have to understand, to your point, just the talent that was created and the talent that was launched out of these shows. And you don't realize it when you're watching them as a kid. You know, I knew that was Opie. Just thinking about that guy's career, I mean, just unbelievable. And Henry Winkler obviously is the Fonz, and then future characters. But just the talent level of these shows was absolutely amazing looking back.
Did you know that in the first season, the Fonz did not start out wearing a leather jacket? He wore a light gray windbreaker because the network didn't want him to look too much like a greaser. And the writers kept pushing and ABC finally relented and let Fonzie wear a leather jacket.
It was this wholesome time where we can't have a guy with a leather jacket on the nightly sitcom. I guess they were afraid of getting canceled before getting canceled was cool. And a lot of these shows dealt with social issues. It dealt with so many different different things. And Happy Days was not shy about that as well over time. They tend to get more and more brave the longer the show runs to put some things out there. That was kind of those things that we learned through the years, and we saw how that progressed. And I agree. I think there's a lot to be learned, specifically from the Fonz and his character and just how he did things and treated things.
So the Fonz was a high school dropout. He was the guy that everybody wanted to be. He was totally cool, but he also never had to tell anybody that he was cool. I mean, cool and success comes from how you feel about yourself. And it's one of those things, you either are successful or you aren't successful, but you can't tell people you're successful.
Yes, he was a high school dropout, but he had a trade. He was a mechanic, and he knew that trade. And that's something I really haven't ever thought about until this very, very moment that you bring this up, that he was a high school dropout, yet in a cool way. So not that we advocate high school dropouts on this podcast, but we have talked about apprenticeships and trades and this idea of, is insurance really more apprenticeship and trade than it is something else? Is it really more down that line, or does it fall more into the go to college and get a business degree and so forth? Or even some of the universities that have started insurance specific degrees, which I don't know where I land on that, because there's so much information that we can learn by working. And that's why I think I'm such an Apprentice Fonz fan, just around his ability to know how to repair, be a mechanic, know how things ran and worked.
One of the places I think the idea of the Fonz really applies to our agencies is that he developed a personal brand before having a personal brand was a thing. You never saw him without his leather jacket. Even when he was water skiing and jumping over the shark, he could have showered in his leather jacket for all we know, right? Because we never saw him without it. And that was his personal brand. And I think that's a place where we as agency owners and producers can really take some pointers from him.
He was who he was, authentic to that and committed to the brand that he was. And there's something that we've talked about a lot around authenticity. He was not fake cool. There are plenty of wannabe cool people or wannabe influencers today. People who just think that they want to do that, but they're really just following other people. There's no uniqueness to them at all. The Fonz was the antithesis to that.
Look at you using the big words.
I can do it. I got a new vocabulary app so I can keep up. But he was just naturally that way. He was naturally cool. And there wasn't this extra over-the-top attempt to be something different.
He was unapologetically himself. And that's what made him so likable. I have a friend in Louisiana who is an insurance agent, and somebody in a review made a snarky comment about his cowboy boots. And the review said something about how their insurance rates would be cheaper if their agent didn't have to wear such fancy boots. Now, we all, of course, thought that this was absolutely hysterical, right? And what was funny is that Scotty grabbed a hold of that, and it became part of his personal brand. And so every time he makes a social media post, he uses hashtag fancy boots, because instead of being like, oh my gosh, what an idiot is this person, thinking that because I spent some money on cowboy boots that made their insurance rates go up, he said, okay, I'll be the guy in the fancy boots. He's unapologetic about it. And that seems like a very Fonzie move to me.
Just the statement of our rates wouldn't be so high if our agent didn't have to have those fancy boots. You know, it kind of puts into perspective the people we don't need to be listening to. And I love that he was unapologetic about it. As a matter of fact, that is authenticity. Finding where you fit, who your brand, what your brand is, who you are, I think is kind of like step 0. It's below step 1. It's like foundational level stuff. Then being unapologetic about it and owning it and living that out, not because you're trying to be something you're not, but because it's so natural, because it's exactly who who you are. I had the hardest time with Henry Winkler's character in The Waterboy because he's the Fonz.
Right.
I'm sure that he didn't love that as an actor, as a professional. That was how good he was at it. That was how good and authentic the Fonz was. I had trouble with it with future things, future characters that he played, going, why can't he just be the Fonz in this movie too?
The reason we wanted him to be in our life was because he was the go-to guy. Like, if you had a problem, everybody knew where to go. Like, if something was broke, he could fix it. If you needed advice, he was there. He was this really amazing connector, problem solver kind of person. And if you can be that as an agency owner, you're going to be successful just like the Fonz.
Well, we've made comments about being a connector, and the Fonz was a problem solver. He was a connector. He was so many of those things, and that's what we do as agency owners. I think we get wrapped up in this idea that it's just about selling insurance. Risk management, true, authentic customer experience, caring for your customers, especially when things go wrong. That's really when they need you, especially around claims time, and being that advocate for them and helping them, guiding them through that process. I think it's everything that the Fonz was wrapped up to being. And there's this idea that it's just about sell. It's just about how big can I get? And I've seen that in some cases. I'm not opposed. I just think it's just this brutal, honest thing about yourself, about where is your happy place. For some agents, it might be $3 million in premium. For others, it might be 10 with a staff. It's okay to just own and be who you are, even if that is on the smaller scale of agency size, rather than looking across the peer group and go, I just want to be what they are. The first thing I ask agents is why? You're making a above average income. You have everything you need, everything you want, your kids want for nothing, and you have an asset that is valuable that you nurtured and you continue to do well with. Why do you think you need to double in size? And I'm not saying that you shouldn't. I'm saying you have to answer that question.
He also had friends of all kinds. He didn't just surround himself with other cool people. He had people in his group that were young, that were old, that were pretty, that were somewhat unfortunate looking. You had cool kids and you had not so cool kids, right? And I think sometimes as a newer agency owner, you have this vision of, well, I want to sit at the table with the cool kids, but there's not room there. I want to sit at the table with the people who I think are extremely successful. Bring your own chair and pull up. And if those people that you think are extremely successful really are successful, they're going to move over and they're going to invite you in. And they're going to say, yeah, come sit with us. We'll share the secrets to our success. Now, if you try to pull up a chair and they're not accepting of you, I would bet 9 times out of 10, they're not nearly as successful as you think they are.
The Fonz was a click buster. He spanned himself across all types, and he was the epitome of, hey, I got a guy. Let me call my guy. I have friends like this. It's something to watch and emulate a little bit. I really agree with this idea of pulling up a chair, especially for our younger agents or our less experienced agents. And I want to prepare you for be careful what you ask for, in a way. For me, that happened in some instances as a young agent where I thought I wanted in the quote club, and I tried to get myself into that club. And then when I got in there, I was extremely disappointed, especially when you maybe know somebody when you're younger and you think of them in one light, and then you get to know them as an adult and you like question their credibility or you question their honesty, and you're like, man, I don't know if this is a person I really want to be mentored by. It's something that I want you to have your eyes wide open about, because you need to be mentored, but you need to choose who you're listening to. You need to be careful about who you're listening to. Those classic episodes of Richie going to the Fonz and these problems and getting solved, there was just this trust there. Richie knew he was going to get this trustworthy answer. And that's the relationships and the club and the group and the cliques that you want to be a part of. And if they don't want you, then you probably shouldn't have been a part of that group in the first place.
They don't want you, then as we say here in the Deep South, then bless their hearts, right?
That's right.
But now the Fonz wasn't perfect. There were some words that he could not say. And there's a video montage of this that I'm going to post on our social media, because this is one of the things that I really loved about the Fonz. And when Shane brought him up in our previous episode, this was kind of one of the triggers for me. He couldn't say, I'm wrong, and he couldn't say, I'm sorry. And there were all of these little words like that because there was just something innate in his brain that kept those words from ever coming out.
The Fonz needed a little bit of work in admitting he was wrong. And it wasn't the fact of actually admitting he was wrong. It was actually saying he was wrong. I think there is a difference between maybe I'm wrong, but actually not saying I'm wrong. And, I think that we all kind of have a little bit of that in us. And that core sin there is pride. And yes, I'm sure that we could easily say that the Fonz had immense pride. And we've used pride in different ways in our world, and pride can get us in trouble. Also, being proud of our work, wanting people to be proud of our work, wanting to produce good quality work. We have to be careful, kind of back to that group that we perceive has arrived, that we're trying to wedge our way into. To your point, they may not be as successful as you think they are from the outside looking in. Once you get inside, we have to be careful about the negative pride connotation that can go with that.
One of the things that you have to kind of dive into a little bit with the show is why the Fonz was the way he was. He was abandoned as a child by his dad. He was the man of the house with his mom growing up. He dropped out. He became a mechanic. He didn't have a place to live. And that's how he joined the Happy Days family, right? He needed a family that would basically fill in for this family that he didn't have. And he found one. And he realized he needed help. He found himself in a situation and he got the help that he needed. And so it's one of those things that, to me, if you really dive into this, one of the reasons he was cool is that he found help when he needed it. It wasn't him being weak or being needy. It was that he was cool because he knew he needed help.
He found his people. That's a huge thing that we can learn from. Not everybody is your people. That's hard in our culture today and our social media world, our comparisons world. It makes it more and more difficult because we see something, or we see what we think we see, and we go, we want that. And we think that in order to get that, then we have to change something about who we are. And maybe there is some growth there. Sometimes changing your people is a good thing. Sometimes you're around not so great people. Sometimes you're around toxic people. Certainly, this is one of the things that addicts have to deal with of all sorts. You have to change your environment. You have to leave that old world behind and find a different world. And a lot of times that means finding different people. But you have to land with who are your people. And when you're constantly seeking other people that are not your people, whether it's clients, the wrong clients, I think that happens a lot with agents. And they find clients that don't fit them, and then there's a struggle. They find staff, employees that are not a good culture fit for who they are. I think that is a huge piece of growing an agency, growing any business for that matter, is getting the culture right. It's extremely hard to grow without the right culture.
One last thing that I think we can really draw from the character of Arthur Fonzarelli was that he was passionate. And a very wise man once said, if you're not passionate, you can't be the best at it. And that, of course, is Shane Tatum.
It's a great saying.
But he was passionate and he was compassionate and he cared about people. And you could see that in everything he did. He cared about his friends. He cared about his community, his church. And you could even see where sometimes he even cared about people that he really didn't even like. And I really think the fact that he cared so much about people really enhanced his cool factor. And what we're talking about today, that enhanced his success.
One of the favorite sayings is love God, love people. And I think that if you start there and you love people, you're authentic, then passion is natural. If you hate the insurance business, then don't do it. You need to find something that you're passionate about. I want you to be passionate about the insurance business, about owning an agency, about helping people and hiring and providing jobs and being a part of this incredible industry because I'm super passionate about it. I couldn't do this podcast. I couldn't run our organization. I couldn't lead anything there. I couldn't do anything that I do if I didn't have passion for what I do, for our people, and for our clients and agents. And so that is definitely an Arthur Fonzarelli character trait. He had tremendous passion for everything that he did. He had passion about his leather jacket. He had passion about his motorcycle and his girlfriends. Plural. Lots of girlfriends on the show. There was just nothing that he did that didn't include passion. And that is a big part of just what we ought to be doing as leaders and as business owners and agency owners is we ought to be able to get up every day and have passion about what we're doing. And if we're not, then I think it's an opportunity, not a failure, an opportunity to say, if I don't feel that way when I get up most days, what's wrong? What am I missing? And do I need to make an adjustment, or am I in the wrong business, or what? I should be doing something different. You may find out that you were supposed to teach or coach or do something in that realm or ministry or whatever, and you've been like, well, I can't do that because they don't make enough money. So you make a little more money doing what you do, but you're miserable and you're not passionate about it and you're not getting up and you're not excited about it every day. That extra money's not going to fix it. That's the piece that we have as agency owners. Is I have found most of the time they are passionate about what they do. And the really successful ones that tend to be extremely successful financially in most cases are also passionate about what they do. And the money part is just the gravy. It wasn't really about the money. It was about the selling, the helping people. It was the type of business that they entered and they just fell in love with it. That's important. And I hope that everyone listening can kind of take that and go, yeah, I want to be like the Fonz. I want to be more passionate.
There were several things that were catalysts for today's podcast, but another one was on the app formerly known as Twitter and now rebranded as X. Henry Winkler and Sylvester Stallone had lunch together recently, and their friendship goes back 50 years to a movie that they did together back in the 70s, The Lords of Flatbush, which is another one of those movies where Henry Winkler plays a Fonz-like character, right? But it was amazing to me to see the two of them together and having a good time and having that long-term extended friendship like that. But how cool would it have been to have had lunch with Rambo and the Fonz?
That's so much testosterone and masculinity in one sitting. I don't know that many people could handle that. Back to X and Twitter for a second, talking about confusing your brand. I just don't know where I land. It's probably another podcast segment here for us, but I'll kind of leave a teaser with, what are you doing? I really don't know. It's almost like there's boredom at the leadership level there. Like, you know what? Let's change our brand to something that's not very unique at all. I'm struggling with that. I've heard nothing but negativity about this entire thing.
I'm with you on this one. So, yeah, let's think about that one. And I'm going to leave us today with this quote from Arthur Fonzarelli. I have no intention of seeing where I've been. I want to get an idea of how cool I appear after arriving there.
Attitude to choice. Make a great one.
Bye, y'all.
Ready to get the ball rolling with your independent agency? Learn more at IntegraAgent.com. That's IntegraAgent.com. Thank you for joining us on IA Forward. Make sure you never miss a show by clicking the subscribe button now or learn more at IAForward.com.